Wasoil Katyuhan, Koneaya Aksai, Lukachati Hatsati, Kadekina, Ejak, Yuchetusak, Dekina, Enach, Ya Ach Ish Has, Yupik Kasami, Kagwantan Yedi Hatsati, Kadaklawi Dachhan. Lingít Enach de Achshi, Achtuasago, Adadu Agachtila Ati, Ya Yidat, Ade Aya Yuchadul Atgia, Lingít Enach, Atinech Iati. Ituasagu Hulitzini. Yugoya Juan Yuhan. My name is Rene. I teach the Lingít language. I am Hlukach Adi Lingít, double-headed eagle Kegani Haida, Yupik on my father's side, and Sami. I'm also a child of the Kagwantan, grandchild of the Duk Oedi. And I want to talk about how you make Lingít sounds. You got to make these sounds to speak the language. So I'd say, Shtuk Etehin. Believe in yourself. Always believe in yourself that you can do this, you can make these sounds. If some of them are giving you a hard time, you're having a hard time with them, just say that. Say, having a hard time with that one, but I would recommend trying not to say, I can't do that, because I believe you can. So there's a lot of different ways we can arrange Lingít sounds. If you look in the dictionaries that we're working on these days, they go alphabetical, similar to English, A, B, C, D, F, G, and so we have letter B, whatever. And then if you look at some of the older dictionaries, they do go from front of the lips to the back of the throat, like the verb dictionary, the Lingít verb dictionary. But what we are going to do is we're going to go through these kind of regions. And so when we go through these regions, we're also going to be looking at some sounds that are very close to each other. Like some of them, like the T and the D, these are the same sound. T, d, t, d. As far as what's going on in your mouth, the difference is if you put your hand right here and you go t, d, t, d, your vocal cord activates. And so sometimes that's the difference between a sound, and sometimes that sound, one sound will become the other one. So a T can become a D in different situations. So we're going to go through these. We're going to do the voiced one, the voiceless one, and then what we call the ejective or the pinched one. And we're going to talk about exactly what that means. So let's go. So let's start by talking about the vowels. In Lingít, there are 4 vowels, and each of those 4 vowels has 4 variations. So what you'll find in our stories, hashkashnigi, in our language, hayukatangi, in our way of life, hakusti, dagun shechet. The 4th one is lucky. So each of these vowels, there are A vowels, E vowels, I vowels, and U vowels. Each of those is a set. And each of those sets can be either, the variations are low and high in terms of tone, da, da, and then also short and long, da, 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 da. So it's musical. So you have to pay attention to that vowel. It's very important. There's lots of consonants, but I think sometimes people overlook the vowels. They'll make the long ones short, they'll make the high ones low. So you got to keep an eye on it because they will sometimes shift. This one, in some cases, is short and high. In other cases, long and high. In other cases, long and low. So let's move through these, going across from left to right. And I'll just do them once, and we'll talk about these 2 bonus ones at the end. A, e, e, oo. So there is an extra vowel, which is the O sound. Oh. So if you are on the coast, you'll hear it as in ho ho. And that's usually used at the end of a word to give emphasis, especially like goodness cheese, ho ho. And one time I saw Walter Sobolov, giving a speech, and he was sort of calling attention to the moment. He stood up and he went, ho ho, ho ho, ho ho, ho ho. And I was sitting in the audience. I remember watching and thinking, this is important. And so sometimes it's used to call attention to what's about to happen. So there is an extra set of vowels, and these vowels occur usually in Teslan and Carcross, although some speakers from Klukwan have been known to make this sound as well. So we're going to get into the uvular sounds or the guttural sounds that we'll call them, which is a consonant with an underline. So you've got G underline, K underline, X underline, or sometimes they're called back G, back K, back X. And if one of those is on either side of this vowel that goes oo, it'll turn into o. For example, a box in most communities would be hook, but in some communities it becomes hook. So that's the vowels. So now we're going to move through the consonants. And as we move through these, we're going to go from in front of the lips to right behind the teeth, to the roof of the mouth, to the newty, their dangly guy, and into the throat. So in front of the lips, you only have two sounds. And when we look at these, I'm going to make the sound on its own, then I'm going to add the vowel, the letter A vowel to the end. Some of them are difficult to make without a vowel, so I'll add a vowel to this one. And I'll say the name of the letter first. W. 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 M. 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 So in some communities, the W and the M are interchangeable, not all the time, but often. For example, if you want to say, what's up? How's it? You can say, was away. But in some communities, you might say, mas away. So now moving back behind the teeth. So we have these sets, right? So this is the same sound, but what we're going to do is first we're going to have a vocal cord, then there'll be no vocal cord, then there'll be no lungs, but it's still making the same sound in the same spot. So English doesn't really require you to close your lungs and make consonants, but Tlingit will do it all the time. So you have to train your body how to do this and how to keep the rhythm of the language without having a lot of starts and stops. So for example, the letter D. 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 Da. Da. If you take the vocal cords off, now you have the letter T. 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 Now if we close our lungs to make this sound, we have to push the air out through our throat. And so we end up with what we call an ejective or a pinched sound. And your goal is to make sure there's not a lot of separation between that sound and the vowel. For example, the CH apostrophe, we'll jump to that one. And with the vowel after it, it should go ch-ah. But some people, when they're just learning Tlingit, they go ch-ah. There's just a little gap there, which is fine when you're learning, but it's something to work on closing that gap. So the T with the apostrophe, the ejective T. Ah. Ah. We're going to jump now to the L sound. This is one of the most important sounds in the Tlingit language. So we are Tlingit, Tlingit. That means a human being. It could also mean a Tlingit thing. So it's a letter L at the front of that word, which is why sometimes it's spelled with a TL, pronounced with a K, a KL, I guess, Tlingit. So Tlingit is not how we speak our language. We say Lingít, and there's a high tone at the end, Lingít. So to make this sound, your tongue is going to go in the same position as if you're going to make an English L, but you're not going to use your vocal cords. Instead, you'll relax your whole face, your whole mouth. You'll blow out the sides. You'll get sha, sha. Keep practicing this sound. It's right in the middle of how we say thank you. Goodness cheesh. Goodness cheesh. That L sound, a voiceless L, right in the middle. So there is an ejective version of this where you close your lungs. And so what you have to do is put your tongue in that same position, but then you squish the whole thing up as a muscle and it squishes air out the sides. It squishes out the sides. You don't want it to click out the front. We'll get to another sound that does that pretty soon. But for this one, it goes ah, 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 ah. It's important to have some spit on your tongue to make this sound. I think it does help. It helps you to make this sound. And so jumping up to the DL. So the DL sound, it's da, 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 meets sha, sha, sha. Those two sounds come together. And if we begin to lose our Tlingit language, we end up with an English G and an English L sound. So there's a phrase, hadla, hadla, and that has that DL sound. But sometimes I hear people say hagla, hagla. But that's language shift. It's shifting over towards English. So this DL sound, it sounds like this. Gl, gl. But there's almost always, I think there is always a vowel after it. And so it comes out sounding different once you got the vowel. It's pretty close to a voiced L. Gla, gla. So if we take the vocal cords out of that, we get the TL. So the D comes out really fast in that DL, and the T comes out really fast in this TL. Kla, kla. So again, like a mother, ach, kla. There's so many Tlingit names that have kla in them. Seitan kla, right? And so if we start to lose the Tlingit language, that'll become Seitan claw, like a claw. We want a claw. So the adjective of this is the one that clicks out going forward. So that's the L apostrophe going this way. TL apostrophe. So what happens is your tongue comes up, like it's going to make that voiceless L. But I think what happens is your whole tongue comes up and closes off the airflow and then releases it into a click. So you get DZ. So this one, d, z, d, z. And again, this D is going to come out very fast. Dz, dz, z, z. Take the vocal cords off, TS. You will see TS to DZ. Like that will happen. You'll see T to D. You'll see CH to J. This sound switch will happen in Tlingit. And you'll learn when, and the reason why is because it's easier. If your vocal cords are on either side, it's too awkward to turn them off. Okay, so this one, the TS, 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 ts. So that T comes out very fast. The ejective version of this, ts, 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 ts. So it's got that the T is almost, I don't think you can, it's very hard to hear. But the TS apostrophe, tsa, and the S apostrophe, tsa, are different in terms of the speed with which they come out of your mouth. The S sound, s, s, sa, sa. The S apostrophe sound, s, s, sa, sa. The J sound, j, j. The CH is the same sound, but you turn your vocal cords off. Ch, 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 ch. The ejective version, ch, 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 ch. The SH sound, sh, 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 sh. N sound. N. N. The Y sound. Y. If Tlingit borrows words or borrows songs, you might have a voiced L, as in the fish, dalayi. But it's not common, and that's not a Tlingit word. It's an imported word from a neighboring language. So now let's move on back to the roof of the mouth, the pizza burning zone. We're going to get a set of sounds here that are a little bit tricky. And so we'll talk about how to make those sounds. But we'll start with a G, and then we'll go to a K, and then we'll go to an ejective K. So we're doing the same thing. Vocal cord on, vocal cord off, lungs closed. So the G sound. G, 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 G. K sound. K, 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 K. Ejective K. Now we can add a W after these, and we get so this is going into a rounded sound. We call it rounded because when you have a W sound, to make that W sound, your lips are going to round, right? And so like at the end, you might have AAW, ow. So you're getting that. The other direction you can have is if you had AAY, you go I. So that would be your lips going in the opposite direction, turning into a smile. So the GW sound, gwa, gwa. The KW sound, kwa, kwa. At the end of a word, if you had a KW at the end, it would go ak, ak. We'd have this little puff of air at the end. And same with the K, the ejective K with the W. Kwa, kwa. So if that's at the end of the word, ak, ak, you get this little puff of air. It comes out pretty fast because you have your lungs closed, and that just gets a little puff at the end. So this gets us to the X. The X with no underline. There are three things I could think of in the world that make this sound. The wind, an espresso machine, and a jet airplane. That's this sound. So if you ever make sound effects, you probably made this sound before in your life, but now you're going to make it in a language. It is not. So we'll get to the X with the underline, and that one is, that is not this sound at all. When you see an X, you go, the ejective. This is one of the trickier sounds in Tlingit. You might just have to walk around trying to make this sound. So the X sound is made in the same spot as the K. So if we do a K and an X, we go and one is making a click and one is pushing air through. So you're going to push air through. Your tongue kind of comes up. There's a little bit of a dip, and that creates a little space for the air to come through. And so you shut your lungs, and then you go And I remember when I was learning Tlingit, I was just thinking, this sound is a beast. So I would walk around and I'd just go and just practice making this sound. So we can add the W to these ones as well. The XW. The ejective XW. And again, if you had it's a word that ended with AXW, get that puff of air. AX apostrophe W, so it's like you're going to blow out a little candle right at the end. So there is a sound that still exists in Teslin, still exists in Carcross, still exists in Cluckwan, but has fallen out of use in most other communities. If you look at old recordings, you'll hear this sound. We write it with a Y with 2 dots over it. And so this sound, it's like a Y sound that meets an N sound that kind of goes through your nose. So it goes, ng, ng. And so this sound, if you look at a word like yina, which is also sometimes pronounced nia, because that probably used to be nga. And so it usually shifts to a Y, or it shifts to an NY. And so when we write it, sometimes we're saying this is a Y, but it could also shift to a W. But you will hear this in Teslin and in Carcross, especially. So, for example, you might say yak hat yi di. But if you go to Teslin, you might hear people say yak hat ying di. And you hear that, and so it sounds like an NG right in the middle of the word there. So this gets us to the uvular sounds. The dangly guy. If you sleep on your back and you're snoring all night, you're just practicing all of these sounds. So we're going to go through these sounds, how to make them. We're going to talk about, generally, like if you're walking around practicing these, I think if you look up, it's a little easier because the new T tends to drift back a little bit. But you're going to be bouncing this thing off the back of your throat. You're going to be doing a few different things with it, getting it to rattle. So the first one is the underlying G, the back G. So this sounds like somebody who's pretending to drink water. We use that sound in our language. The back K or the underlying K. The ejective version, this is another all-star sound. Okay, so this one you're going to hold your breath. You're going to make that K. Now take a drink of a refreshing beverage. And let's add a W. So the back G with the W. The back K with the W. At the end of a word, so you'd have something that say that ended A, underline K, W. The ejective version with the W. Ejective back K, W. So again, if it's at the end of the word, it's a little different. It has that at the end. Now this gets us to the final 4 as far as the tricky ones, okay? We're almost there. We're almost done. X underline. That's the one. Now the ejective version of this one. Back X apostrophe. Ejective underline X. However you want to say it. Without the vowel. I guess it's like you're holding your breath and snoring at the same time. Add the W. Back XW. At the end of a word. Back ejective X underline X apostrophe W. Hua. 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 At the end of a word. Akhu. 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 That gets us to our last two sounds. In the throat, this is the glottals. So the first one we write as a period. And that period in the middle of a word usually means close the lungs, open them back up. And so you do this in English with uh-oh, right? You hear that, you hear the lungs close right there. And so, for example, we'll go A, period, A. Then the H sound. Ha. Ha. Yayidet. Yan yayidlaq. Chakuna aqnuch. Aqawe. Llzidain aya yuqak gitan. Lingít qinach. Yewe aqtuasakul takat yuhan. Yigu ayaqwan. Gunlchish. Gunlchish xawe.